Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Mathyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Who has experienced or been privileged to reflected happiness on their Anandamaya Kosha since seeing you from last week? Hands up. Okay, so what is this reflected happiness that we speak of? This is the happiness that we feel whenever something pleasant happens in our experience. It could be hugging a child. It could be, sitting down with your partner, watching a movie. It could be seeing some pleasant news on TV, or chanting, or performing, or undertaking some hobby. Anything that immerses you. Whenever you feel that happiness, that is the Anandamaya Kosha's reflected happiness that is being manifest in our physical bodies. Of course, it's being manifest in our minds, but then it's also manifesting through the 5 koshas, and therefore we say, I'm happy. So we said that this is reflected happiness. So it is still not original. Why is it not original? Because it is still an object of knowledge. It's still something that you can quantify and you can say tangibly, this is happiness. It came in time. In other words, it wasn't there just a moment ago, and now you've gained an object of your desire. Having that object present, there is now, this happiness is now induced. It's now felt. We also said that this happiness does not contradict this original Ananda, Brahman's Ananda, even though it is an object of knowledge. So it is also worthy of pointing out that this happiness that we speak of is not the kind of happiness that a Jivan Muktaha has when they're generally content with themselves. So often we think that this Anandamaya Kosha, so this is what a Jivan Muktaha undergoes owing to their clarity, even though this happiness is a byproduct of a clear mind. But a Jivan Muktaha doesn't necessarily undergo this reflected Ananda, because this reflected Ananda only happens when the person undergoes some happy experience in their life. In other words, it is event dependent. For example, you see a pleasant student go, or you see a pleasant friend, and then Ananda comes. So then when we speak of a Jivan Muktaha's fullness or happiness, even though it's the same words, right? We say, okay, Jivan Muktaha is generally happy. And then we speak of happiness, Anandamaya Kosha's reflected happiness. What's the difference? Even though the English word is the same, the happiness itself is actually different. So Anandamaya Kosha's happiness is triggered at the time of an event, a pleasant event specifically. Whereas fullness means I am content just the way things are, without having the need to make them more or less than they are. In other words, I accept things just the way that they are, owning to the knowledge, the Jivan Muktaha's knowledge that everything is already perfectly ordained by Ishwara's grand order. Everything happens at the right time for the right reasons on the basis of a cause-effect relationship. In other words, Jivan Muktaha's contentment comes or springs out of their knowledge. In other words, this happiness does not depend on an event. It is a result of assimilated knowledge. And what is that assimilated knowledge? That everything is okay as it is right now. Even though there are apparent weaknesses in this person, there's apparent faults, there's apparent things that do not seem to be most conducive, as we would generally universally agree, for example, COVID, right? Or whatever happens in the world. Still, nevertheless, everything is ordained by this grand order, and it happens according to the right time at the right place. And therefore, on the basis of that, the person is happy with the world, with themselves. It doesn't also mean that they negate the fact they get involved with the world. They very much get involved with the world just like anyone else. But underneath that involvement, there is that contentment owing to assimilated knowledge, that Jnana Yoga. Okay, so what do we now discuss? We brought out the difference between the event-triggered reflected happiness and the natural happiness that a wise person undergoes permanently. Okay, so that is now clear. We can then move on to verse 2. So that was all verse 1 revision. I wanted to bring verse 1 to make sure there's no loopholes that we will, even though you can ask later on. Now, verse 2, Krishna said, "Know me as the kshetrajna in all kshetras." And then we use the clay pot. Now, why do we use this? We use this because if you ask the question, where is the clay in this, where is the clay specifically here, then there's no place where you cannot find it. So this means that the whole pot, the whole form, the whole manifest form which you and I deal with is pervaded by the one substance because of which this form enjoys its existence, but also because of which this form is sustained by, but also into which this form one day or through the course of time will modify into. And what will it modify into? Into none other than the very truth that it enjoys right now, right here. So this means this manifest form, this kshetram, has nowhere to go except the very place's place, because even place is kshetram, remember it's time and space, the very place that it already is here now. So this means that this pot can now start to enjoy a level of unity instead of separation, because it recognizes that even though there are different pots with different features, right? And you see, for example, if you're born as a big pot, right? Then you're not a small pot. And if you're a small pot, if you're born with a small pot, then you're not going to be a big pot. So now the small pot doesn't have to go, inside its little cushion and contemplate on its life of how it could be bigger, and how it, it doesn't have all of the features of the big pot, and how it's not, how its status is not as big, or it doesn't have as much strength or as much as beauty as the big pot. Now, the small pot can appreciate its uniqueness as much as the big pot. In fact, even a big pot, if you're a big pot, then you will still have equal amount of dissatisfaction. You will say, oh, life is so heavy, I'm noticed. For example, celebrities, right? Celebrities often, recognize very quickly that being famous, right? Even walking down to a shopping mall, people just don't leave you alone. Now imagine that kind of life, right? Imagine a life where there's no privacy at all. And then, there's stalkers, for example, or all of the comments that get left through assumptions. So no matter whether you're a big pot or a small pot, either way, there are pluses and minuses. So this is why I said originally, a Jivan Muktaha can accept its place in this world just as it is and start to make the best use from the manifest form which it has been gifted by the grand order Ishvara. So this is where self-acceptance comes. This is where self-love comes. Not in pretending, oh, I'm perfect, there's nothing wrong with me, but rather recognizing that I have been given this form and you have been given this form and other people have been given their individual forms. Now, let's look into that form and ask, what are my strengths? What are my talents? Where can I make use of these talents? Where can I shine in such a way that it not only contributes to the society and the family and the community, but also brings that happiness to myself? Because we are all seeking happiness. We have established this since last week. So this is where this understanding comes, from which you can now resolve these inadequacies in the light of knowledge and not pretending like they don't exist. Okay, so it also means that this pot is, despite its limitations, the clay itself is intrinsically free from the limitations belonging to the pot. So this means if this pot's focus is in the manifest pot, then it will see, it will feel, and it will talk about nothing but the manifest limitations. For example, no matter how big this pot is, it's always going to look for a bigger reality that it could enjoy, that it's enjoying right now. So this means this is about changing your focus. It's not about pretending, but rather recognizing that the content of myself, who not only appreciates or can enjoy these apparent limitations, but the very substance or the content of that is also the one same content of every other form in this universe. So this means, what is moksha? It is changing your focus. From what to what? From the apparent limitation, from the five koshas, onto that substratum in and through everything. That substratum called kshetrajna, because of which the kshetrajna, recognize the modifications that are undergoing inside this manifest form, or this manifest form Andre, or this manifest form Mina, or this manifest form Victor, or whatever the name is. So again, this comes back to that firm knowledge, constant reminder. Yes, this form does enjoy a level of manifest reality with its modifications and limitations, but at the same time, simultaneously, it also can put its focus onto that one truth in and through everything. Okay. Now the next question that we can ask is, what is the reality of this pot? What is the reality? What reality does this pot enjoy? And this pot, if you think about it, is neither completely unreal. You cannot call it illusion. Because to say something is illusion, you're actually implying it is completely unreal.
Andre, one question. Now here, pot is kshetra or kshetrajna. What is analogous to?
As a metaphor, the clay will be now kshetrajna. The pot will be kshetram. But then if I take this on the level of the entire universe, then you can now, even the clay itself is kshetram, because it's just a bunch of, mithya particles, right? It's particles within particles.
Okay.
Okay, where was I? Okay, I was asking the question, what is the reality that this pot enjoys? And this pot is neither totally unreal. Why is it not totally unreal? Because it does enjoy a level of objective existence, right? You can talk about it, you can put water into it, you can drink from it, so it does serve a genuine function, right? Suppose that you were in a forest and you needed some water to drink, and then you had nothing but a pot, right? You had nothing but a form that can store water, right? So in other words, it does enjoy and it does have a function which can serve something else, which depends upon it. Right? Even if this was a tree, then how many things depend on a tree, right? Birds, they make nests. And then, you take shade underneath the tree and it converts the oxygen into carbon dioxide into oxygen. So endless functions, no matter what form in this universe we look at. So that's the first. You cannot call this completely unreal, because while it is what it is, that is, while it is a pot, it is a pot. So I can't call it an illusion. Because I'm talking about it, I'm looking at it, I'm holding it, I'm perceiving it, everything about it enjoys some level of realness. But at the same time, you cannot call it absolutely real. Why can you not call it absolutely real? Because the moment this form changes, what I used to now talk about, put all of my attention on, put my life into, put all of my goals into, one thing about this changes, it no longer holds that same value which I depended upon just a minute ago. Therefore, it only appears real while it appears real. But it no longer enjoys that reality the moment some attribute about it modifies into something else. Never mind, the content still remains the same, but the very manifestation has lost its appeal, which just a moment ago was serving its function for what it was. What reality do we call something that is neither completely unreal, nor is it completely real? This reality, in between reality, we call mithya. So what is mithya? It is a dependent reality onto something else. So what is this in-between reality whereby it is neither completely unreal, nor is it completely real? This reality is called mithya. What is mithya? It is a dependent reality onto its predecessor, onto something else. In this case, this mithya pot enjoys a dependence upon the clay. So in that same way, if we convert this into the world, what is Krishna saying? Know me as the kshetrajna. In other words, know the whole as the kshetrajna, in this case compared to the clay. in all kshetrams, in all potware, in the entire world. So know me as that one reality, satyam, which can no longer be reduced in all of the other reducible forms called mithya. So what is mithya? Anything that you can reduce down further into another mithya. You can reduce a molecule into atoms. You can reduce an atom into particles. You can reduce particles into quarks. You can reduce quarks into space itself. But you cannot reduce that further. You cannot reduce existence. Because if you reduce existence, then you come with a logical problem. Then out of what did this form come from? It has to come out of something. And the last point that we can extract from this teaching is that changing your focus from the form onto the substance, because of which this form enjoys its form, is sustained by this form, and is also goes back into that substance. Once you know that substance, then from that moment on, you can relax about having to know everything about everything. So this means it has a direct transformation in one's life. How does it have a direct transformation? By letting you understand that no matter where you look or what you find or in what shape or manner or function you find it, what are you going to find? You're definitely going to find two things. You're going to find mithya, that is, you're going to find a form, but behind that form, you're always going to find the one same substance, because of which that form enjoys its existence. So this means that having ascertained the substance behind all forms, there's a level of relaxing. There's a level of transformation that a person enjoys. And this is the direct benefit that comes from this knowledge. Okay. And the next question is, how do we demonstrate that kshetrajna is in all kshetrams? This was still at the level of pot and clay. So now let's bring it down into, again, a reality that we can refer to. Firstly, what is the nature of kshetrajna? Kshetrajna is the final reality. What is the nature of that final reality? The answer is sat chit. Sat means existence and chit means awareness. Now, when I say existence, this existence actually enjoys a intelligence. So in existence, there is an intelligence. This intelligence is called Maya. So now, careful. I'm not saying that existence is intelligent, but I'm saying that in existence, there is a power of intelligence, and this power is called Maya. Therefore, okay, what is the logical problem if you say that existence is intelligent? Everything is existent. You know, do you find like people acting intelligently all the time and everything's like, no one's making any mistakes, and no. There's also ignorance, because intelligence implies lack of ignorance, but there is also ignorance. That means people don't know. So in other words, existence is free of both intelligence and ignorance. This is why I say in existence, there is a power called Maya, and this Maya, what's the nature of it? It is intelligent. So from that, before moving on, is that absolutely clear now?
Wouldn't it be more correct to say existence contains all of intelligence and all of ignorance, and chit is the awareness? Would that be more accurate?
Okay, first of all, I want to get to this question of ignorance. Last week, we have established that there is no ignorance in existence. Have you seen that session, Martin?
Yeah,
last week. So that's so we cannot say that ignorance is stored in existence. I explained clearly how ignorance gets made by the mind that added up the facts incorrectly. So existence, quote, stores, but more, the way in Vedanta we say it is, in existence there is a power of intelligence. There is a power called Maya, and this Maya is its nature is intelligence. So now, knowing this, I said the question, what is the nature of kshetrajna? I said sat chit, existence, awareness. And this existence enjoys a power of intelligence. Okay, so now let's talk about what is this existence in which there is intelligence. What is that? It is from which time, space, and objects are born of, sustained by, and dissolve into. In other words, everything in this universe, including time and space, is born out of this existence, is sustained by this existence, and is resolved into this existence. And this existence, remember, is the nature of Kshetrajna. And what was the original question? Know me as the Kshetrajna in all Kshetrams. Know me as the one reality in the entire universe. Okay. Now, question is, how do we know that this existence has intelligence? How do we know that this existence enjoys this intelligence, this power of intelligence? The answer is because if you look at your body-mind right now, is it random? You know, you look like a big blob of organs just hanging on the side and nothing makes sense. Is it like that? No. If you look at a human being, every organ is placed strategically. The heart's not, in your foot or something, because then it's going to be prone to damage. So your heart's protected. If the body goes cold, what happens? Then the core temperature, the temperature from the limbs reduces and it protects the core. That is an intelligence of itself. So every response in the body is a program, is an intelligent program of itself. So this means no matter what aspect of our humanness that you look into, you cannot not find one level of randomness. And this lack of randomness implies there must be an intelligence because of which this orderly function, this orderly body has been put together and capable of doing things predictably. If there was no intelligence, then things would not be, you could not predict things, but you can absolutely predict things. How? You put food, you know you're going to live one more day. You drink water, you know it's going to hydrate the body. You go to sleep, you know you're going to get rest. So this means, why do we do all of these actions? Because we know that by doing them, they're going to produce an effect. Therefore, if I do one cause, it's going to produce an effect. This cause-effect relationship is the very intelligence. In other words, there's a connection between one action and there's a connection of that action having an effect, a result. And what do we do all our lives? We do actions which guarantee or predictably tell us that it's going to produce a certain result. Even to attain success in this world, what do? You go through a certain procedure, a protocol, a ritual. What kind of ritual? Thinking, imagining, visualizing. Sometimes you even pray. Sometimes you even write down, a blueprint, the SWOT analysis. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses, opportunities? What are the threats? You contact joint venture partners. All of these things, why do you do them? You do them because you know that every action is going to guarantee or increase the probabilities of receiving a desirable result. Yes, Robert.
Andre, one thing I struggle with, I have been struggling with for quite a while, is that the nature of Brahman is Sat Chidananda. So we use three words: existence, consciousness, and limitlessness. But then we introduce Maya, and we say that Maya is intelligence, which is a power of existence. Does it become an attribute? Existence must be without attributes.
Write this question down, please. It's going to be important in verse 5 and 6.
I was just contemplating on the idea of perfect intelligence and then trying to reconcile that with, in terms of the human body, with disfigurement and disabilities, and how that, I kind of get it in terms of when you bring karma into play, and but I just wanted to speak to that, if maybe for the benefit of others.
So yes, it is a play of cause and effect. So just like in this life, right? If you, for example, act irresponsibly, right? Drive the car irresponsibly, it increases the probabilities of the car having an accident. So this means this probability is increased. Why? Because my own action has caused that. So in that same way, if you look now in the future and you say, what happened? You're kind of, you got, your arm is broken and, you got a jaw dislocated. What's going on? And you say, well, I had an accident. And then why did you have an accident? Because I was driving irresponsibly. Or I was driving too fast. I wasn't looking enough. Or it doesn't even have to be an accident. It can be whatever it is. The point is, every cause, every effect, that is, every result comes from a preceding, from a past cause. So this means, in the same way, when someone is born with a disability, what is this? Where does this come from? You say, well, why does person A get born healthy and person B get born unhealthy? If you don't bring in karma, then you now have to go and address what's the morality of Ishvara, right? So does Ishvara just, say, okay, I'm going to randomly select you to be disabled, and I'm going to give you privileges? Ishvara is not like that. Ishvara is simply provides this cause-effect linkage, this association between what has happened in the past and what are the results in the future. So in that same way, when someone gets born with a disability, don't look at it as a random thing, right? Because how do you explain it? Simple. It's a carryover from the previous lives. Therefore, whatever the lives has contributed in the previous incarnation, that papam gets carried over into this present life. In that same way, when someone's born in a royal family and someone's born in a disadvantaged family, what's the difference? Same thing. The person that's born in a royal family has done certain things to attain certain level of punyam that has brought them into a place of being in a royal family. And those who have been born in a disadvantaged family, in that same case, if you could look at their life, which is probably unlikely, then you would see that linking point. In other words, there's a carryover from what has happened before.
And I think to add to that, when you're seeing it in somebody else, it shouldn't be seen in such a way that you're looking at it as payback or some sort of godly revenge or something like that. It's more to do with that person manifesting in the best way possible for them to evolve further as a positive thing.
Yeah, good, Martin. That's a good point. So now, suppose someone is born with a disadvantaged limb or even the mind, right? Then you got two choices. You can say, well, how do I make the best use of this? Or you can further use that and then make a story about it, make a narrative about it that further disempowers the individual. So the person, whatever point they stand, even a small pot, they can say, well, I have been offered this smallness. I may not understand why, but I can still ask, how can I now make the best use of this smallness, this limitation that I've been offered? And then slowly the person builds themselves up and then they come to the top. If you look at any successful person, you look at their biography. Biographies are excellent because you really get to be humbled. We only see on the appearances, right? Their success and what they've attained. But you look at their story, like I've been looking at Steve Jobs, for example, and Bill Gates, their, biographies that are worthy of reading. And you look at how much risks they've taken, how much, sacrifices they've put in order to come to the position that they're enjoying right now. So in that same way, no matter where the person is in their life, it is only a reflecting point of their past actions. Right? And this is where we get to understand that this order is not some random order, but rather it is a predictable order that gives us exactly what we deserve on the basis of our known or unknown actions in the past. In most cases, they're unknown, but it doesn't mean just because you don't know or you don't remember, it doesn't mean that it's not true. It doesn't mean that you've been, unfairly gifted this life. It just means that you don't. It just means that you don't remember.
How does it come into play when you kind of choose your life as well? So you may choose to have a disability and to have extra growth, extra challenge, but how would that determine what level of disability, say?
Exactly. So this is what I'm saying, Kelsey, is that, you still have a choice. You're given this free will, and with this free will, as a self-conscious human being, you can look at yourself and say, well, do I want to keep going? Am I satisfied with the amount of work that I've put into this disability or this challenge? If I'm satisfied, then, go find something else. Go find another challenge in life that fulfills you. Or you can, spend some time looking further into it, and you can keep looking at it from different angles. In fact, you cannot help yourself but to look at it from different angles, because who can get away from a thorn in a mind? Nobody. As long as a thorn is there, you're going to keep looking at that thorn over and over again. So this means the thorn truly, what do I mean by a thorn just means something that in your perception, you think is holding you back. As long as that thorn is there, it means that I haven't looked at that, quote, disability in a proper light. I haven't looked at it in a way that it actually causes me to move further on into my life. Because as long as things are in there, right, and you're thinking about it on and on and on, it means that I am resisting something about it. Whatever the person resists, that very thing keeps on persisting in different colors, in different shapes, in different forms. So how do you know you've truly resolved it? When it no longer keeps bothering you, when it no longer keeps coming back. And I'm not talking about by putting it aside underneath the carpet and saying it doesn't exist, but you've looked at it from a different angle, in such a way that it simply relieves you emotionally. How do you know? Because there's an emotional relief. That's how you know there's a genuine change in respect to the, quote, disability, which you at least perceive to be. So free will does come into play. In fact, that's all you really have, free will. But it's still your choice. Do you want to let go of it, or do you want to look further into it? How do you know it's time to let go? Because you feel relieved. There's an empowerment now. So everything can be looked at in a light that teaches you something instead of holding you back.
Free will comes under which kosha, if we have to put it?
Free will is just a law. I wouldn't say it's any kosha specific. Of course, it's the Vijnanamaya kosha, because the intellect has to interpret, do I want option A, option B? But free will is it's like an order, just like Dharma, right? It's always prevalent because it is existence itself. What's the nature of this manifest existence? Dharma. That's why I say Dharma is Bhagavan. Bhagavan is Dharma. How do you know Bhagavan? By recognizing Dharma. That's why we can only arrive to this knowledge by practicing Dharma. No skipping Bhagavan. You know what they say, you don't need Bhagavan, right? Well, what you're saying is I don't need Dharma. If I don't need Dharma, then what am I saying? What does that imply if you say I don't need Dharma? Then my life is probably taking shortcuts. It's probably doing something mischievous. It's probably doing something that is causing injury to myself or onto others. And how is a mind of that nature supposed to start to appreciate this very person that's present, that's true, and also that very truth in everyone else? Impossible. It's going to be too consumed about its little past mischievous narratives that it cannot let go of. Guilt, shame, embarrassment, hurting others, cutting corners, cheating, lying behind the backs. All of these things stay in the mind. They consume the mind, that divert the attention onto those. The mind gets diverted onto those very things, and it doesn't go away, because this is not your world. This is Bhagavan's world. And what does Bhagavan's world say? Unless you are completely open and honest, I'm going to keep showing you those things that you are not willing to let go of. I'm going to keep showing you your past history, which you are hiding from. This is the beauty about the system. There's no cheating. There's no going anywhere trying to hide from. Who are you hiding from? You can't, because Bhagavan is looking through your eyes, is shining on your very mind. You know how they say, God is always watching. Who's watching? Kshetrajna. Know me in and through all kshetrams, including the kshetram which you call yourself, your name. Therefore, you cannot escape from this. What do I mean by that? Cannot escape? This requires honesty with oneself, starting with oneself, because who's the center of one's life? You are. Not even your partner is the center. You are the center. And that center has to center itself. How does it do that? By opening itself up to its inner narratives and being honest. Hey, there are weaknesses. So let me look into them. Let me address them. Because you want to live a happy life, right? So why keep it one more day? Why just hide it? From who?
So, but the moment we introduce free will, we are departing from Advaita, right?
I mean, even to recognize the reality of Advaita requires your free will to sit down and say, I choose to listen and to understand this knowledge. So free will goes hand in hand with everything that we do. It's your friend, but it can also be your enemy, because your free will can make you go and do things that are going to then cause negative consequences, which are going to haunt who? You. Or or that
The other
same
one's-
free will can be used to make you do something kind, gentle for the world, which makes you feel good about yourself, which uplifts your confidence about yourself. And that confidence then says, so I am good enough. I can master this. I can integrate this.
See, it's like Bhagavan is like the clay who is who is in all the pots, right? Right? Bhagavan is like the clay.
Yeah.
And we are the pots. Okay. So even the thoughts and bodies, everything are like pots, right? Because everything is an object.
Yeah.
So the clay is common for a bad thought and a good thought, isn't it? The bad thought is also made up of the same clay. Good thought is also made up of the same clay.
Okay, pause. What did I say about ignorance last session? Please don't bring in the words good or bad person. Okay. What makes, quote, a bad person?
Thought. I'm talking
adding
about
up the facts incorrectly. In other words, given on a silver platter, here's the world. Here's the world child. Here's the world son. Here's the world daughter. Now go and, being endowed with free will and Dharma, go and find your purpose. Go. And then through the course of actions, we get engaged with different people, we pick up different notions, we get educated in a certain way, and then we make up the facts wrong. We take clay fact 1 and we take clay fact 2. In other words, we take objects, both made out of clay, and we add them up together and we make an error. And then we make a conclusion, therefore this error is the way that it is. And that conclusion makes the person do those, quote, mischievous things that are not kind, that are opposite to what you would call a dharmic person.
You could say that duality resolves into Advaita through the action.
At the same time, you don't have to actually, resolve anything to anything, because, what is there to resolve? If everything's already the one content, right? In other words, it's an understanding. What does this understanding mean? It means everything is as it is. I don't need to resolve anything. I don't need to let go of anything. I don't need to kind of, do any mental tricks with anything. What are you doing? You're only playing with the same content. But the irony is you do. Because the mind is still, right? The mind is still carrying these notions which thinks it's otherwise. So yes and no, but you need to know from which standpoint yes and from which standpoint no.
Yeah, I was also just wondering more about having free will when you're in the middle of being reincarnated. So how much choice do you have in the next life?
There's a level of free will that I do have as a human being, but it doesn't mean that it's that free will extends for every aspect of life. How much free will do you have whether you have a backache tomorrow when you wake up? You don't. It's like normal. Everything's normal today. You wake up tomorrow, there's pain. From where? I didn't do anything yesterday. Right? I didn't play any injurious sport yesterday. How much free will do you have, whether, how much your food gets digested? Or whether you understand this knowledge? See, even if you have the free will to sit down and try to understand, we still don't have the free will to, by the reception of that knowledge, we don't know how much is it going to get integrated. That still happens by itself, according to this intelligence. Yes, Robert?
I just wonder whether what Kelsey is talking about is a belief that's taught in the spiritual world that your own higher self decides the incarnation you're going to have and what lessons you're going to take on for that next lifetime. And perhaps that's the point she's making.
You don't have to worry about future lifetimes. Why? Just live to the best of your abilities in this life. And whatever good things, whatever punyam you have acquired in this life, that will be continued in the next life. So the next life will be much easier. Teachers will come, right? The parents will be religious. They will expose you to the right teachers, to the right knowledge. And therefore you're enjoying the next life only because you put the hard work in this life. So yes, we can talk about, free will in terms of what life you get or so on, but you don't have to. You just focus on this life because I said earlier, there's a cause-effect relationship. There's a continuity. There's a carryover. Okay. So the question that I asked was, how do we prove that this existence enjoys a power of intelligence? And I said, If you look at this body or even your thoughts, everything about it is predictable. You think one thought about something, you're going to have a certain emotion about whatever you thought. If I start thinking about war and murder and dark stuff, if you want to call it dark stuff, then I'm going to have that physiological effect in the body. If I start thinking, how can I give and contribute, and where are my talents, and how can I shine those talents, that is equally going to contribute a different kind of a physiological order in this body. Therefore, this is where your free will lies, in your present tense thoughts. Where is my present tense focus? From there, I can now dictate or add on to the probabilities, how do I want this person to go in life? Where does it start? Right now, right here, today, 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 today. So every day you wake up is literally a brand new life given to you. It says, here, live. Okay, but what do most of us do? We choose to take what we've done yesterday because the path of least resistance is much easier. Let me just take the habits, the things that I've said yesterday, let me just pass them over into the present, into today, and just kind of keep on living like that. Very easy, isn't it? But there is no progress, or there's very little progress in that kind of thinking. So this means there has to be a level of discipline. Like, hey, I'm going to step up and make some difference. And what differences can I make today? One of the things that we can do is wake up and you say, you know, by the time I go to sleep, looking back onto today, what have I learned? What difference have I made? What have I done something new for the first time in my life? You can ask those questions so it can give you some dictation, some gauge as to how you have lived your day. Otherwise, the whole life passes just carrying things over from yesterday into today. Logical predictability according to the past causes. Cause-effect relationship. This is intelligence of itself. Close your eyes. It increases the probabilities of going to sleep, assuming you're tired, right? If you're not tired and you close your eyes, are you going to go to sleep? Probably not. This is cause-effect relationship. How you make use of that cause-effect relationship is the kind of results you get. So this is why it's in our interest to get educated. If we don't get educated, this Dharma, which I'll talk about in later verses, then every cause that we put out that is out of alignment with Dharma is going to produce an effect that is undesirable for yourself. So it's in your interest to learn the principles of Dharma. What do I mean by Dharma? Those orders or laws, when lived by or when abided by, then you're in harmony with nature, in harmony with yourself, with your environment. And that produces pleasantness throughout your life. Pleasantness means there's no resistance, or the resistances come down. Resistance towards what? Your own narratives and your environment. How do we prove that this existence, which has a power of intelligence, was also there before the manifest universe? So let me now extend this onto the entire universe. Anything in existence can be reduced into smaller mithya forms. What do I mean by this? Take anything right now. Like take this, this pot, and you say, okay, it's a pot, but then you say, what does this pot depend on? It depends on the clay. And then what does the clay depend on? It depends on the molecules. Molecules depend on the atoms and so on. So you keep on going down, 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 down. So there's a depending thread with this object. There's a depending thread with any object that you look at into this universe. Soil, fire, right? Fire depends on the right conditions, depends on the air. So this entire universe is one big dependent mithya reality, depending on something else. The complexity of these forms, the smaller you go down, the greater this complexity increases. For example, how complex is it to put the right molecules together? 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen equals water. What happens if you say 3 hydrogen and 2 oxygen? Is it still water? No. What dictates that it's specifically 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen? Intelligence. You look at any molecule in this world, you look at the composition: 5 nitrogen, 3 hydrogen, 2 oxygen. For example, you've got silicon, you've got benzene, you've got aspirin. All of these are molecules. all of them share a certain composition, a certain number of atoms put together, which make up that molecule. In fact, if you want to see, I'm going to show. Let's look at, okay, here's aspirin. Okay, you see that carbon 9, hydrogen 8, oxygen 4. So you put that amount of atoms together and you create aspirin. Now, if you change the composition of them, for example, let's say, what else are we familiar with? Butane, which is a gas, which is flammable. You have carbon 4, hydrogen 10. So you add up a certain amount of molecule, a certain amount of atoms together, and you create a different molecule. So look at all of these molecules that we have throughout the universe. And we give them a name, of course. All of them are made up of a specific amount of atoms, making that molecule what it is. And this is the intelligence that I'm talking about. So at every level, the complexity increases. What is in and through all of it? Isness. Carbon is. Okay, but you can change carbon itself, right? You just add more, you attach it to, let's say, oxygen. You attach it to nitrogen, and then you create a molecule. Now, molecule is. And then you add those molecules, combine them with another molecule, and then you create a form. Suppose, like silicon and, whatever else is a sand made of. Sand granule is. And then you add, you go to a beach and you make a sand castle. Sand castle is. And then the ocean water comes over and then destroys your hard work. Tear, you cry now because your work is lost. Tear is. The no more of a castle is. So the isness remains in and through every form, but the form itself changes. The complexity increases or decreases, depends on whether you go down or whether you go up. But at every level, that form is, that form is, that form is, that form is. In other words, the existence is in and through all forms. This is why I say, what's the nature of Kshetrajna? Existence, awareness. So we're not specifically talking about existence. Okay. Now, ultimately, this intelligent existence, you can no longer reduce. Why? Because if you reduce intelligent existence into nothingness, if you reduce existence, which enjoys the power of intelligence, into nothingness, then you have a logical problem. And that is, how can you create an intelligently operated universe or intelligently operated body out of nothing? How can you create an order in this universe out of nothing? How can you create time and space itself? And then all of the objects and the supernova, you saw that video, remember when I showed you that video of the planets, right? Vast network of planets. How can all of that come out of absolutely nothing, zero?
They say that the Big Bang was caused by a fluctuation in the field, but they don't explain any further than that.
Okay, fluctuation in the field, that's actually a good description, which will help me in verse 5. Out of what are you going to create this intelligent universe? You have to create it out of intelligence itself, because this universe of planets, like colors itself and the space between each planet, that itself is intelligence. If you put Earth a little bit closer to the sun, it cannot harbor life anymore. If you move Earth farther away from the sun, it cannot harbor life anymore. It's cold. So there's an exact amount of precision in and through everything upon our analysis into it. The sun, very much having an effect on how plants are able to convert that sun energy into something that the plants can grow from. That's called the intelligence of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is induced into the plant's intelligence. The sun itself has a function which has a corresponding effect on those plants, intelligence. The distance between the sun and the earth, intelligently put at the right position. The moon's at the right, how many effects does the moon have? Right, full moon, new moon, it changes our moods. That in itself has a dependence there. In other words, our bodies are itself dependent upon the moon, but the moon itself is dependent upon the sun. So at every level in this universe, there is a dependence going on, but there is also a function going on. But also the function that's going on has a corresponding a use onto something else. So the function is not just individually, they always have some association, some relationship to something else in this universe. This is the nature of the universe. All one intelligence, running in and through 24/7, our entire universe, that we are only beginning to understand and write books about and use big telescopes and microscopes, try to analyze and then write poetries about, Rumi, write lots of poetry about about reality. That's what inspires the poets to just to express this love and this mystery about the universe. It just keeps on flowing because we are all we're all worshiping this one intelligence in different forms, in different languages throughout history. And this is how all of our books are written. Martin?
Oh, no, I was just going to say I was enjoying reading Stephen Hawking's and his Brief History of Time, because he's a mathematician, of course, and he'd done the beauty of the calculations between the outside edges of the universe and the amount of stars and planets on the external, on the macro, and then on the micro, he'd actually looked at right down to what you just said about going down to the atoms and the quarks, and he calculated it out mathematically that the human structure and form is almost equidistant between the two extremes. It was just an interesting observation that had its own sort of poetry to it in a mathematical sense.
Yeah, and this is where, it's a humbling experience, because if you look at how much you really know in relation to this universe, like a dot, exponential fraction, infinitesimal small amount of knowledge. And then on Earth, we're like, I'm a scientist, nothing against scientists or anyone, right? But I'm just saying what humility means, recognizing the big picture. In that big picture, sure, you can, display your talents, but never lose sight of how little you actually know. And this is all intelligence manifesting as kshetram. This is all know me as the kshetrajna in this entire universe, appearing as different forms. So what are we only ever worshiping? This one reality, kshetrajna. Okay. Now, the objection is there was nothing before everything came. This is actually a common argument that comes, and I want to clear it up. First of all, Buddhism is fantastic in its own right. It teaches us a lot about mindfulness, a lot about compassion, Dharma. In fact, I come from many years of Buddhism, which has taught me many things about compassion and Dharma and how to live a mindful life. So I want to first bring that up because I also want to bring up a flaw in a specific area where a certain school of Buddhism makes. So I'm not putting down the entire Buddhism. I'm just saying in this specific area, this is where the flaw comes, and then thus it produces a whole series, a chain event of errors. So this notion of asat means non-existence. That notion comes from two schools of Buddhism. So when I say non-existence, I mean that something came from nothing. The first one is Shunyavadi. Shunyavadi comes from the Mahayana Buddhism. It is basically a theory of negation. So this school holds the view that reality is unreal, empty, it's just void. Everything is mithya. Vedanta agrees so far. Everything is mithya. Okay, good. In other words, everything is dependent upon something else. Things are not as real as they appear. But then you ask them, what is the final reality? And they say there's no such thing as final reality. In other words, everything disappears into something else. Hence, the world is unreal. What does it resolve into? Nothing. It resolves into something else. But it's still mithya. In other words, mithya resolves into mithya, into mithya, into mithya, into it just never ends. What is the final reality then? What is the ultimate resolution which you can no longer resolve things into? There's no such thing. So what's the conclusion in this school? Number one, the world is unreal. I make it to be real. Who's this I that make it? My mind. I make it. The subject makes it to be real. by giving it value, right? Things are worthy of pursuit. Things are not worthy of pursuit. This is attractive. This is not attractive. So I make it real. Therefore, if I want liberation, I need to dismiss the world. Why? Because I'm falsely getting attached to that which is unreal. Therefore, I must detach myself, reject everything because it is unreal. So what does the whole life become about? It becomes about giving up. Give up everything. Give up your family, give up the world, go to a monastery. And this is an example how one deviation, right, from the truth has a chain reaction of lifestyle changes that you then live accordingly to that deviation. That means subsequent mistakes get created by not recognizing the final reality. What's the final reality? There's no such thing. There's only mithya. Because everything is mithya, don't get attached to the world. In order to do that, I need to detach. I need to let go. I need to be alone. What is the counter argument for Vedanta? We say, show me one thing which came from nothing in this universe. Go look for it. The seed. The seed came from nothing. Well, then how are you going to create the seed if it came from nothing? Because the seed itself has a blueprint of intelligence for an entire oak tree. This is why we cannot answer the question, what came first? The chicken or the egg, the seed or the tree, the father or the son. Because there's no such thing as first. It's beginningless creation. So this whole linear thinking, there was a first, right? This is all the mind trying to quantify, put the entire reality into its little small perspective of thinking, linearity. And the existence itself, from which everything comes, which has a power of intelligence, that existence is beginningless. Because how are you going to create existence out of nothing? Where is existence going to start from? This is again the limitation of the human mind, trying to quantify things into a point of start. And then say, okay, now from the point of this resolution, let's try to now create a conclusion. You can't, because you started off from the wrong place. And the second argument that Vedanta says is there is a presence which is non-changing. And that presence is satyam. That presence is not mithya. So everything is mithya, just like the Shunyavadis of the Mahayana Buddhism school says. But there is only one presence which is other than mithya. And that presence is satyam or kshetrajna. The second school is Kshanika Vijnana Vadi. Kshanika Vijnana Vadi. This is the second school of Buddhism. And their argument is that what you believe to be the final reality, that is consciousness or kshetrajna or the knower, is actually flickers of consciousness. And when you put these flickers of consciousness together, they're like flicking. And these flickers of consciousness, if you put them together, then it gives you a continuous stream of consciousness. And this stream of consciousness that is continuous, this is actually the mind. This is not consciousness, this is the mind. This is their argument. So imagine like this, your thoughts, right? In other words, what they're saying is this flicker of consciousness is your thoughts. So it's like thought going in and out like this. And this makes it appear like there's a constant state of consciousness. And what they say is that Vedanta is calling this flickers of consciousness the final reality. This is their argument. What's the Vedantic counter-argument to this? We say, there is a reality called Satyam, called Kshetrajna, because of which these flickers of consciousnesses are known. So the original question that I asked was, what is the nature of Kshetrajna? The answer was Sat-Chit. Everything I spoke about was Sat. Now onto Chit.
I think the Buddhist school that you said, it's half correct, but not fully wrong. Nothing can, something coming out of nothing. Okay. In quantum physics, actually, there are many instances where things come out of nothing. Like, for example, if you read about Hawking radiation, it is something that comes out of nothing. You can Google it later. Okay, Hawking radiation is something which comes out of nothing, like a particle-antiparticle pair gets created out of nothing. Because, and next thing is space itself is expanding. So the space is constantly getting created from nowhere. So these are the various examples. But here the argument again comes is that who is the person who is watching that? like particle, antiparticle pair are getting created out of nothing. But who is the person who is watching that? The scientist who is watching, the consciousness who is watching. So that consciousness is there.
Right. Okay.
Right. So it's like half truth. What that school is like. If something is coming off, if objects are coming and going, that I think it's what even Ashtavakra says. Even in dream world, real world, things come and go, but the constant is the one that who is watching it. So that exists.
Things come out of existence.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily say they come out of nothing. It appears like that because, see, they're only saying it comes out of nothing on the basis of perception, right? On the basis of instruments. But you have to ask, out of what reality does it come from? Out of reality called existence. Right. So in other words, our instruments may not be able to pick up out of what it comes out, but it still comes out of what is. And that isness is the reality itself. Okay. So chit. Chit means awareness, consciousness. In Vedanta, whenever we use the word awareness and consciousness, they are used interchangeably. Okay. So in order for this existence, which enjoys the power of intelligence, in order for that to create, sustain, and resolve each mithya form, which I've just been explaining, at every level, it has to be thus conscious. Just like an individual has to be conscious to make use of their intelligence to create and to sustain a relationship and to even sometimes make a decision and to, change some things in a relationship. So in that same way, no matter how vast this intelligence is, this limitless intelligence that runs the entire universe, it cannot do anything unless it itself is conscious. And this consciousness is chit. So just like a human being needs to be conscious to make use of their skills, in that same way, this intelligence needs to be conscious to make use of its own vast intelligence. It's easy to appreciate chit, that is consciousness, in a living being. Why? Because I just need to see you right now, your face, and for those of us who don't want to show our faces, that's fine, I can still see you. It's easy to appreciate it because, you're moving and you're smiling and, you're kind of, shaking your head and doing things. So you can say, okay, so this person is obviously conscious, right? They're alive. They're glowing. But what about between two living beings? Before I get there, for those of us who have had the privilege of seeing a person die, you would know this experience where one moment it's like alive. And what happens the moment the person dies? It's almost like your relationship to this person immediately changes because the consciousness is no more, the instrument is no longer capable of harboring consciousness, even though it's still consciousness itself, but reflecting consciousness, that instrument is no longer capable of reflecting consciousness. Okay, so the question was, what about between two living beings? The question is, how do you demonstrate this? Imagine two appliances, fan 1 and fan 2, okay? And they're both spinning. They're both connected by a wire, an electric wire, obviously. So what's powering those fans? The electricity. So in other words, this electricity I can appreciate how? I can appreciate through fan 1 and I can appreciate through fan 2. In other words, you can appreciate electricity only because there's an appliance connected to that electricity. But can you appreciate the electricity between the two appliances? No, because you just see a wire, right? You just see kind of a wire in between. So it's very hard to appreciate electricity unless there's an appliance that is connected to it. If you now connect a third appliance in between, then what happens? You now appreciate electricity. Suppose it's a heater in a form of heat. If you connect a speaker, then you appreciate the electricity in a form of sound. But the moment you take that away, then it's like, what is there to say? It's almost unnoticeable. You just see a wire in between. Consciousness is very hard to appreciate unless there is an instrument that's capable of reflecting that consciousness. And that instrument specifically is a human being. The moment you bring a third human being in between, because consciousness is always present, that human being now also is able to shine their own internal mind in a form of words, in a form of sounds, in a form of the way they express themselves. You bring in a fourth person in the room, because consciousness is in and through everything. What Krishna said at the beginning, know me as the kshetranya, in and through all kshetrams, in the entire universe, where there is no such place where the consciousness is not. You bring in a fourth instrument called a person, and that person now also, like that appliance, is able to sing their own tune. Why? Because consciousness is pervading that instrument also. All people walk out, all four people walk out of the room. It's kind of like, you know, silent, nothing to appreciate anymore. Has consciousness gone? It only appears like it. Why? Because the instrument, which is capable of reflecting that consciousness, is gone. Therefore, there's no one in the room. It's like one big, you know, like just a silent place, eerie. Another person, you know, some person walks in, suddenly there's life inside that room. Why is there life? Because consciousness was there before that person came in. Consciousness is still there when that person entered the room. The second example is if you use light. Let's use light. In fact, you're only seeing my face now because of light, right? And what is this face? It is a reflecting medium. In other words, the reflecting medium temporarily got away. Therefore, the light could no longer reflect the features of that reflecting medium. So it appeared like the light is gone, but the light was never gone in the first place. It was just waiting for the reflecting medium to show up. For example, 2 fingers. Why do you see 2 fingers? Why do you see 2 fingers? Because the light is reflecting on both, right? Suppose it's a dark. You can't see anything, right? Suppose this was dark. Why not? Because the reflecting medium is gone. But does that mean that the light is gone? No. Because the moment I add a 3rd finger, that light continues to shine. It continues to illuminate the moment I bring in the 3rd reflecting medium. Is this clear? So in other words, the light went nowhere. It only seemed like light went somewhere. Why? Because the reflecting medium was no longer there. The moment I add the reflecting medium, I add another one, and then I add a 3rd one, boom, it shows up. Also in Dakshina Murti Stotram verse 4 by Adi Shankara, he uses a lovely analogy of a pot. And this is not like the previous pot. And he says, imagine a pot with 5 apertures, like 5 holes, and you have a light inside the pot. And this light is now, suppose it's a dark room, and inside this pot, there's a light, and it's shining. And it's going to what? Illumine all of the 5 apertures. It's going to be shining through the 5 apertures, yeah? Now, those apertures are only going to illumine an object if it crosses its path. Yeah, so suppose there's a hole here, and then it's shining light out in the dark room. So it's only going to illumine an object when something crosses its path. Now, take this example for an individual. What is an individual? Like an instrument with 5 apertures, specifically the eyes, the skin, the ears, right, the tongue, and the nose, capable of perceiving the world, capable of illumining the world. How? Because that one light of consciousness is in and through every single person. And it's illumining through the apertures of the ears. So if the awareness is illumining through the aperture called the ear, then it's only going to pick up an object which is symbolic of sound. It's not going to pick up an object symbolic of form. The aperture of eyes is illumining that light also, but that light is being illumined what? Through the aperture of an instrument capable of perceiving form only. Therefore, if something crosses that form, that instrument, then that's going to be illumined, and then we call that sight. Ah, I see. And then we have another aperture of tongue. And that tongue is also shining awareness. But because the awareness is shining through the aperture called tongue, which is only capable of shining taste, then if you give it anything other than taste, it's not going to pick up. It's only going to thus pick up taste. So 5 apertures, 1 consciousness shining through all of them, but because it's shining through apertures with different functions, it's thus only able to illuminate the sound or the form or the taste or the tactile feedback, which that instrument is specifically made to detect. And then you apply this example onto every single individual. One light shining through every individual in this universe, through every jiva. Now, from this example, or from these examples, what can we conclude? We can conclude, number one, consciousness is the content obtaining in and through every form. Know me as a kshetrajna in all kshetras. Know me, the consciousness, obtaining in and through every object in this universe, like the clay pot we used. What about matter? What about kshetram? Matter is a medium, a reflecting medium. When the matter goes away, consciousness doesn't go away, but what goes away? The expression of consciousness goes away. Just like when the person leaves the room, the consciousness in that room doesn't go away, but what went away? The expressing instrument. The instrument capable of expressing that consciousness, because the instrument is healthy, it's alive. When that instrument is no longer alive, unable to reflect consciousness, then that instrument goes horizontal. That's called physical death. But consciousness hasn't gone away, because someone's going to be right next to them and say, you know, oh, this person has died. In other words, consciousness is still operating, but the physical instrument is not able to operate. Therefore, it's not able to reflect that. That's why you have this change of relationship to a person that has now passed away. When matter goes away, consciousness doesn't go away, but what goes away? The expression of consciousness goes away. Know me as a kshetrajna in all kshetrams, including the space, including those times when there seems to be no activity at all. That quiet room that seems eerie, quiet, is just waiting for an animal, for an insect to walk in and to express consciousness in the form of a rabbit or a dog or a cat or something, or a human being. Imagine like this entire field, right? And there are these instruments called jivas, you and I. And these instruments are just walking in this massive field of consciousness, powered by consciousness. 5 apertures powered by consciousness, constantly, wherever we go.
That's an interesting vision, because when you actually project that one step further and you shut down the power of this, the ability to see, if you go 100% blind, the ability to hear, you shut that off completely. The ability to feel, take all those senses away from your nerves on your skin, the smell, the taste, shut it all down, and keep yourself alive on artificial, intravenous tubes.
Yeah,
the consciousness is still there.
Excellent.
Their expression. Yeah.
Very good, Martin. So this is a good example. You close your eyes, you've closed the aperture through which awareness shining through the instrument of eyes is no more capable of shining. Therefore, you're no longer illumining form. You close the ears. Awareness is no longer capable of shining through the instrument called ears. Therefore, sound is shut off. Keep on doing that. But the sense of I am, still remains, no matter what you shut down.
So what about the clinical definition of brain dead? Like if someone is actually brain dead?
Yeah, good.
What happens to Kshetrajna then?
Excellent question, Lorena. So this is a common question. It is brain dead, but in other words, prana is still working in the individual. So those who are clinically brain dead, why is it brain dead? Because the brain is still working, but it is damaged. Therefore, it's unable to receive the mind. It's unable to receive the subtle body, that is the manomaya kosha and the jnanamaya kosha. But the brain is still working enough and able to keep the organ flowing. But it's unable to receive the subtle mind. And therefore, the mind's unable to shine through. Therefore, there's no thought. There's no thinking.
So it's kind of stuck in this realm of...
Twilight, yeah.
Awful. Unless they turn off the machine and then it's free, so to speak. I see that in kind of like dementia patients at final stage. There's no quality of life. They're kind of like not responding. It's really sad. Like it's like they're not there, but they're there. Not tubes and you know, like a clinical definition, but
but it's slowly degrading, right? The quality to
right to the end.
respond.
It's like that. It's like that.
Yeah. So this is it. So this is the brain slowly losing the capacity to receive the mind, and the mind's the mind's still healthy, by the way. The mind's still reflecting that consciousness and ananda from the Anandamaya Kosha, but the mind still needs to flow through to the Annamaya Kosha, to the physical brain. But the physical brain is no longer working, and therefore the experience is just partial, right? Because it's no longer an integrated person. Yeah.
And everybody comments the same thing when they approach that person. They all say there's no quality of life there. That person is barely responding to anything. Like, if someone had suicided in a previous life and they have to repeat that, you know, a dharmic experience in the next life, they've still got free will to sort of decide at some point, this isn't the right direction. I don't want to do this again, or something might happen that they realize it's not the right way to go, even though they've got those tendencies to repeat that act. Yeah, they might just decide, you know, this isn't the right thing, and then they can free themselves from that path. Is that what you're saying? Absolutely.
And of course, deciding, of course, it's not as simple as deciding. You got the influence of the friends and family now. What have they taught you? Have they taught you enough clarity to make that wise decision? This kshetrajna, it has different names, and depends on how you look at it from different angles. So you are mom and dad from the standpoint of your children, but you are a child from the standpoint of your parents. Okay, so this means one person immediately changes their name according to the relationship which they're now dealing with. Okay, so in that same way, kshetrajna also has different names. So when kshetrajna is in the form of a single body mind individual, then that kshetrajna knower is called jivatma. From the standpoint of the microcosm in Sanskrit is called vyashti. When kshetrajna is in the form or operating through a single body mind, and that kshetrajna is called jivatma. From the standpoint of the macrocosm, this is samashti. When kshetrajna is in the form of all bodies, that means operating in and through the entire universe, all bodies in the universe, then that kshetrajna is called paramatma. Now, the adjective is jiva and parama. Parama means highest, but what's the noun? Atma. So what is Atma? Kshetrajna. What is Atma? The knower. So Atma and kshetrajna are one and the same. I, kshetrajna, the content of everything, am called jiva from the standpoint of Andre. I, kshetrajna, the content of everything, am called jiva from the standpoint of who wants to volunteer. Okay, from the standpoint of Roberts. I, kshetrajna, the content of everything, am called paramatma from the standpoint of the entire manifest universe. One kshetrajna changes the name depending upon which standpoint you look at it. This is why Vedanta says, tat tvamasi. You are that. That refers to the entire macrocosm. You, the small individual, are that. Why? Because I just said, I, the kshetrajna, the one reality, am called jiva from the standpoint of any name you choose. But I, kshetrajna, the content of everything, am called paramatma, called Ishvara from the standpoint of the entire manifest universe. And this is what Krishna means when he says, know me as the kshetrajna in all kshetras. The names change, but the content remains always the same. So remember, verse 2 consisted of two parts. First part was know me as the kshetrajna in all kshetras. The second part of verse 2 is the knowledge of kshetrajna and kshetra is true knowledge. So I will cover this and then we will close. What does it mean? What does true knowledge mean? It means knowledge, knowing which, once known, everything at once becomes known. This knowledge we call Paravidya, Brahmavidya, Jnana Yoga, Atma Jnanam, Vedanta. How is everything known? Because kshetra and kshetrajna doesn't exclude anything in reality. In other words, you ask, what is reality? It only has two categories. Kshetra, kshetrajna. That's it, full stop. What is kshetrajna? The knower, the content in and through everything. What is kshetra? The individual forms appearing as what they are, which are not away from kshetrajna. They're not away from the content. They're enjoying the very content, but in a different form. So again, why is this true knowledge? Why is kshetra and kshetrajna the true knowledge? Because it is the knowledge, knowing which, once known, everything at once becomes known. Why? Because if you ask the question, what is reality? Reality is kshetrajna and kshetram. There's not one thing that you can ask in this universe at any time, point, past, present, and the future, that's going to be outside of these two categories. So if I understand these two categories, I'm at one with the universe. I have now made resolution with everything in this universe. Whereas all other knowledges, what do they focus on? They focus on kshetram. You go into different fields of science. How many different fields are there in science? Hundreds upon hundreds. You look into any field of science, there's so much to investigate. Some schools, they even turn kshetrajna into kshetram. Therefore, consciousness now becomes a topic of discussion around your dinner table. But what does Vedanta say? Once understood what really kshetram and kshetrajna means, you don't fall for this trap. You don't fall for these endless discussions that just have no ending, because it is mithya within mithya within mithya. But it also doesn't restrict you from engaging, because it is interesting. I get it. I love biology. I love science. I love so many things. But it causes the person not to get lost in them. So the benefit is twofold. One of them is you're at once at ease with the whole universe. There's nothing more to know. Kshetra and kshetrajna, full stop. At the same time, because you're at ease, your mind is now much happier, much more freer to pursue those things which you always wanted to pursue. This is the irony of it. It's not like now you understand kshetra and kshetrajna, now you just give up everything. It's not like that at all. But rather, you're now free to pursue as you wish. And you cannot get stuck, because we are very clear, only two categories in existence. And we've also pointed out that you can never be away from the knower, because all your life you're knowing about things. With this knowledge, we can end verse 2. So the essence of Advaita Vedanta is recognizing the kshetra and kshetrajna teaching, knowing that kshetram is never away from kshetrajna. Wherever there is form, this form is never away from the content. That's the essence of Vedanta.
So is another way of describing that, going back to what we were talking about with the senses and the attention of the senses going outwards, being the chaitanya, and the reception of the image coming back inwards is the checha.
The attention is always going outwards, because, see, I still give absolute reality to forms, right? So I want to give, I want to see what this form is. I want to make love with it in different ways, in different shapes and methods. Why? Because I haven't looked deeply enough into recognition of this form. Therefore, my attention always goes outwards. But whether this form is outwards or whether this form is inwards in the mind, on the screen of the mind, it is both kshetram, because it is an object of knowledge. Even happiness is an object of knowledge, because you say, now I'm happy. But see, now with this knowledge, you don't reject things. You don't go, happiness is just all kshetram. What did I say? Wherever there is kshetram, that's exactly where kshetrajna is. Therefore, you're only ever enjoying yourself from different standpoints. So through this understanding, our relationship changes immediately. In what way? In a very dharmic way. In fact, this is why we're going to then, follow up this teaching with Dharma, because now you're asking, how do I live this? How do I express this through my words, through my actions, through Dharma?
I think some people think it's a license to do whatever they want. I hear that a lot with these, just live for the now, nothing else matters, like all that sort of talk. You hear all that?
Yeah, this is a partial teaching.
Instead of being dharmic and trying to better yourself and live within, do good for society, or, they just think it's a license to just do whatever.
Yeah. And, the funny thing is this license always haunts the person back. It always, the bubble pops eventually, always pops.
they don't consider reincarnation afterwards. I think they forget that part, that, you know, your prabhata karma, as you said, and, you know, the samskaras, that the imprints, the impressions will be carried on to a further life. They don't add that bit. They just live for the now, and think that they can just do whatever, you know. I read that a lot on social media. Like,
it's a twofold thing. The person themselves, you know, has a responsibility, but also the teacher has responsibility. And the lovely thing about the Gita is it doesn't allow this, because you'll notice that every high teaching is immediately followed up by bringing it back down to earth. And then it goes back into high teaching and then down to earth. And so this trains you never to go above this world or above your own thoughts or above anything, but to be humble. How do we develop this humility? By then asking, okay, knowing this now, being privileged to this highest knowledge, how do I now speak in such a way to shine this radiance in the name of Bhagavan? How do I be a messenger of Bhagavan in and through my actions and my thinking and my thoughts towards those that are around me? How do I become a mere instrument for Bhagavan's compassion, Bhagavan's empathy, Bhagavan's love in a form of giving and serving? Right? So this is a natural question that's going to come up. This is why we're going to address it. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.